Okay, so I wanted to start talking about the Nephilim and the fallen angels. Obviously, by what I titled this after, and someone had asked me in the comments to kind of dig a little bit deeper into specifically the Nephilim. And obviously, you have to kind of talk about fallen angels if you're going to talk about the Nephilim. So I wanted to kind of get into it because I've talked a little bit about some of the angels. Like there are some entries or posts on some of these fallen angels, and so when this term came up, Nephilim, fallen angels, like I wanted to approach this over a series, right? So I'm going to kind of work on a series of these. So you guys are going to see more videos about fallen angels, more videos about the Nephilim, and how it's still really relatable to a lot of other mythology. So I wanted to kind of start this as kind of being my starting point, right? I think this is a good place to kind of, kind of put down like my early markers in terms of like what I think about Nephilim and Nephilim mythology, fallen angel mythology, and what I see is kind of merging into other belief systems as well, because it gets really, really intricate with this belief system. So I wanted to start this off kind of the right way and attack the Nephilim from kind of some basic levels. I wanted to talk about the who, the what, the why, the when, and try to kind of put all those things together over several presentations. I'm sure it's going to take dozens, right? So with the Nephilim, the first thing I wanted to define is who the Nephilim are, as I'm going to define this, right? Because there's lots of definitions about them, because there is, even within the context of antiquity, in terms of religious beliefs, there are arguments about what they actually were. Now, some or a lot of meaning, or if you look at Enoch's literature, you're going to define them as the offspring of the fallen angels and human women, right? Most of the stories say women, although there may be some stories about female angels, although that gets very complex when we start having conversations about what angels are. So that's in a nutshell what it is. It is divine creatures coming to earth, having sex or relations with human women and producing children that were hybrid. That's the core of it. And I think it's not only applicable in biblical literature. I look at it in other ways. If you look at the Enoch books, they're already defining, should I say, Gilgamesh as being a Grigori. Remember Gilgamesh's parentage being 2/3 divine, 1/3 human. So that is outside. Obviously, I don't know if Gilgamesh is mentioned in the Bible, but he is mentioned obviously in Sumerian mythology, right? And I think that there are appropriate type characters in other myths. I think a lot of what we see in Greek will fit into that. So as I'm going to define it, the Nephilim are the descendants of these fallen angels, and we'll get back to defining why they're important and why this is important. The fallen angels themselves are these 200 angels that left heaven, that left Abrahamic belief systems, God, and came to earth. For what purposes they were sent was initially, I guess, to be the Watchers. This is what and they were literally called the Watchers or the Grigori. So we'll hear that name mentioned as we work through several texts to kind of get a better understanding. Right? I think the standard view of looking at understanding the Grigori, understanding the Nephilim, understanding giants, I'm going to throw that terminology out here as well, and I should have thrown that out earlier, is going to be really central on a couple of specific books. Enoch writes extensively about this interaction. So the Enoch books are going to be very important in any conversations about the Nephilim. And I know most people are pretty aware of that. And the Book of Giants becomes extremely important. And from those, there will be other references that we'll kind of go through for some of the definitions. So we understand essentially that these fallen angels come to earth. They not only have offspring, they cohabitate with women, they take them for their wives, which was the big sin. They had sin. Their sin was craving that human flesh. And what they also did was spread knowledge. That's another thing. And we're going to talk more about the fallen angels. Because these fallen angels, for the most part, become defined as demons, right? Demons that you can easily kind of reference now. The list was very specific about the 200 angels who fell to earth. We know some of the names: Azazel, Azameal, Abbadon. We know some of these guys from other stories, not realizing specifically what they actually represented. But we'll get further into kind of looking at each of them individually. And like I said, I've been kind of profiling some of them because they become called demons now. And these were demons who had a lot of knowledge. That was the other thing. They spread knowledge, and each demon was associated with some type of discipline that they were teaching. Now, this could be anything. This could be, biology. It could be astrology. It was real sciences. So there was always an attachment of knowledge that came with these fallen angels, which is a very interesting kind of take, that they brought knowledge. And this is why they were often summoned, because demons possess great knowledge. And demons, summoning demons was very common, and we'll talk about the why. The demons, these same demons were ultimately summoned by King Solomon. If you're not aware, King Solomon was probably the most prolific demon catcher of all time. No one has summoned and restrained as many demons as King Solomon, and it's how he built that pyramid, that temple. Okay? The demons were building a lot of this, or these fallen angels. He would summon them. He would bind them. He would interview all of them. He would find out their personalities, what their expertise was, and if he could bind them, he would make deals, and they would build part of his pyramid. He put them to work on a lot of the angels, and we'll talk about that further because it says some special things about that pyramid that we'll want to talk about later. The other part, of course, is obviously we defined the fallen angels. We know who these guys are. We'll get into details. The next part, obviously, is their human wives. So we don't get a lot of mythology, much said from this perspective of the human wives. Perhaps in digging, we'll find more information. Of course, the last part, of course, is the Nephilim themselves. And the who for the Nephilim is that these were said to be giants. These were greater men because they were hybrid. They were said to be greater men. And this is a passage here. The Nephilim were in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. The same were the mighty men that were of old, the men of renown. That tells us who they are. These were the great men of the world. These were the heroes. These were the giants. These were the great kings. So when we talk about, our heroes, and we think about Hercules, we think about Jason, we think about Perseus, this fits them. These were the kings of the world. And what became was that their influence of both the Nephilim, who were the kings now, and their parentage, who controlled all this knowledge, that they were controlling the world, and they were building the type of world that they chose to. And this is, we would say Gilgamesh is a product of this. And this thus produces all the flood accounts, because, per that belief system, the world became fraught with sin. Some stories that talk about the giants talk about how much they were consuming resources, that the amount of resources that the giant kingdoms took to thrive were exhausting the resources of earth. Others say that they were fraught with all of this sin. So those are two major components of it. And when we think about it in this way, and we talk about giants, well, there have been giant accounts on every as far as I'm aware, there's giant accounts on almost every continent, right? We know definitely throughout Europe, they tell lots of giant stories. Jack and the Beanstalk is probably one of the most famous from that region of the world. There were giants in Africa when they were during the biblical times, when the tribes were fighting. Those were giants. When we talk about Goliath, we talk about that. Those were giants. We know that Native Americans, or the Inuits to the continent of the Americas, they also told stories about giants. There is a prevalent idea of giants that existed on the earth at some period of time, just like this says. So this is where we get into relying on time frames. When would this have occurred? This, of course, was all in the early times of men. This is in the early foundation of man's civilizations, and thus they affected all the lines. And the problem with this is that they had left so much of a legacy. All the angels were not ultimately washed away. And we have to even start to question some things about even the nature of angels. If these fallen angels came to earth and they saw the daughters of men and they instantly wanted to have babies, what were the nature of angels? Because what we have been described at in other books, i.e. in the book of Ezekiel, it says the prophet describes 4 living creatures that surrounded God. These creatures had a human-like form, but each had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs were straight and their feet were like those of a calf, gleaming like burnished bronze. So humans and angels at this, per this description, don't necessarily sound like they're compatible creatures, right? Now, we know that one of the things that angels could do was adopt various forms. So there are some questions that we'll have to ask as we're kind of working our way through this. But I wanted to just kind of get a grasp on the topic. We're going to talk more about the Nephilim. I'm going to explain the specifics of who they are. I'm going to take it in granular bits like that. And I want to build a nice body of research about this topic, about the Nephilim, about their impact, about who they were. We'll start by kind of tracing more through, the fallen angels is the place to start, and then get into what their lines actually, ultimately meant, and what it meant to have these great heroes, or to have these Grigori warriors that existed and perhaps were wiped out. Specifically with this, I know if you have something to add, I'm going to encourage you to do so in the comment section. This is going to be a great topic to kind of get into and tear apart. As always, hit the like and subscribe. I'm going to build a couple playlists based around this once I get a few videos in, but I just kind of want to throw the topic out and kind of get the ball rolling.